What is art?
Art is...
Art is history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered.
Art is our collective cultural history.
A weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is...
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I was honored to speak with Way, a Brooklyn and Providence-based artist who works with sound, media, and movement to talk about topics of queerness, foreignness, and otherness. Way received an MFA in printmaking from the Rhode Island School of Design and a BFA in new media at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. They have participated in numerous artist residencies, such as the NARS Foundation, Anderson Ranch Artist Center, and Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. Over the course of the conversation, we talk about Way's work with sound, their background in design, and art theories related to otherness. Stay with us. Welcome back, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I am so honored to be here with Brooklyn-based artist Way. Way, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So I'm obsessed with your work, Way. It's really interesting. I don't often interview sound artists, so I'm really interested in how how the conversation unfolds, and then maybe integrating some of your sound pieces into the conversation, so that listeners can get a sense of what we're working with here. Mm-hmm. So to start the conversation, I'd love to talk about your ongoing series titled Ensemble Series. And my understanding is it's part performance, part sound, part sculpture. And what I could tell from the documentation of the piece, it seems to me like what you're doing is putting microphones inside these like minimally geometric shaped sculptures. And in this series, particularly, you activate the objects using performance artists. So that's my really brief description for listeners, but I'd like to hand the mic over to you and ask if you could explain this project a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. So this is the ongoing series that I started around 2022. So about my last year at grad school. So it really evolved over time. But in terms of the project right now, it's the 5th edition that you've seen on the website. So I did this performance with Lower Manhattan Cultural Council back in so I recorded it at the end of 2023, I want to say. And then I recorded it at the end of 2022, then edited in 2023. Mm-hmm. So the project right now is in the performance sort of format as in visual, but it includes a lot of object makings, technology, and also sort of this ensemble narrative throughout performer's body. And the work mainly talking about the sort of a transient, sort of ephemeral identity that placed among all of us, and how can we make this ephemeral connection in a very either designated space or space that is like kind of more man-made in a way. And whatever you take from the experience that you connected with each other in that space is all yours. And that kind of feeling that's sort of like ephemeral environment identity is really what I'm trying to bring out of this project.
Hey listeners, I just want to plug in a quick note here. You might hear some instrumentals or something that sounds like digital sound effects in the background here, and that is sound from one of Way's compositions. So you'll be hearing that track throughout the rest of the conversation. Yeah, what I really appreciated about watching the documentation is how quiet it was. So it was like a pretty starkly white room, and then there were these were they wax balls? Was that the material that you used to create those cylinder type of shapes?
Yeah, so those are wax, and it's a mixture of 3 different kind of wax. So there's beeswax, paraffin, and also soy wax. So to like create this, I would call like more semi-gloss texture, and also it easier feels on hands versus like if it's just paraffin, it's very brittle. If it's only beeswax, it's like really soft. So it's made of wax, and also the color is a pigment that is react to the temperature. So they call it UV thermal pigments. So the whole idea is when performer touch these objects or playing with these instruments, their own body temperature will gradually change the objects, and kind of like in a way that slowly merge into a different type of visual or merge into different type of identity or how kind of like the objects and also subjects intertwine with each other.
Yeah, so these wax-based balls, my understanding is what I could again tell from the documentation is that they're mic'd somehow, right? Because there are wires coming into them, and when the performer touches the object, you could like the sound of like the hand hitting the object is amplified astronomically, right?
Yeah.
So what I really appreciated from the documentation was like the quiet nature of the space. So I guess I'm curious for if we could maybe get clarification is when these performances happen, do they happen in an isolated space where it's just the performers, or are they meant to be performed within with a live audience present?
Mhm. Yeah, so it really go through different editions. So the documentation that is currently online right now, the latest one is more of a designated environment that I want to do a really good documentation in a way. So that version is no audiences and is sort of a kept quiet in a more kind of like design way. But the previous edition are all with live audiences. And when I have live audiences, there's different way, sort of like different simple prompts that I give to the performers.
So I'm just doing a screen share here, listeners. If you're watching this, or if you're not watching this on YouTube, if you go to our website, you could see, yeah, just visual references for what we're talking about. So in this documentation on Way's website, kind of flipping through here, there are a number of performers. All of them seem to be female identifying.
Hmm.
Most of the, actually, all in this shot are look like young Asian women. They're wearing black and white clothes in an otherwise very white gallery space with black wires and then gray objects. So I kind of touched upon a couple of things there, Wei. I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about your choice in the identity of the performers.
Yeah, so the work from the very baseline, I want to have this um, connections or at least from my one like perspective to invite people that share some sort of a foundation of feeling being othered or feeling this sort of a queerness to individuals. So when I invite these people, so in this performance in particular, there some of them are friends or some of them are friends, but they don't really know each other. So all of them they are all in New York circles, but they don't really have like interactions on day-to-day basis. So I prefer usually people have this sort of foundation connection. So when we share in this like very intimate space, there's a sort of a quicker or easier way to connect. In terms of the female identity, I think it only happens in this version. So in the previous version, there's always sort of male identifying but queer or queer overall or queer at large kind of identifying and performance in this work. And also undertone on some work, I do have a lot of sort of a baseline technology perspective in the work, but most of the time I don't like how masculine technology are being presented in the current art scene.
Yeah, I'm wondering how you do that because I think you're absolutely right. There is like a lightness and a delicacy to the way that you kind of present the technology in this space. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how you made those decisions or what decisions you did make in order to make it appear more feminine?
Yeah, of course. So I kind of came from a new media background. That's my undergraduate study. So I was kind of a trained designer that we learned all sorts of like technology software to to just kind of like dealt with that perspective of tech. And I live in San Francisco for very long, so people know sort of the tech center of the US. So I, come across a lot of friends and people that just like very mass presenting in tech, but also design overall. So every time I'm seeing a more sort of technology focused work, I see more of this like really raw way to deal with it that's like really on your face per se. And I'm kind of it is raw, but it's not really honest in my perspective. And and I also have a deep roots like loving materials and the materials particular in sort of sculpture or performance are like in the long like sort of art history lens are considered feminine, right? Like there's latex that I've been using, felt, wax even. So these are all kind of considered feminized materials in art history. And I want to combine those sort of like cover the technology in a way. We're not really covered, but like kind of intertwine those two elements that I want the feminine, so-called the feminine material to be at the front, but also have this like undertone of technology that you can experience, but not really, kind of in a more like invasive way.
Can you talk a little bit about, because what happens, especially in the beginning of this performance, if you're watching the screen now, it seems to be getting a little bit more aggressive, but especially in the beginning, just like what your intention was for kind of miking these really subtle sounds and amplifying these really subtle sounds.
Yeah, so as you can see, this project's like very touch-based in a way that this type of a microphone, which is called contact mic, is a sort of a touch-based microphone. So it only transmits sound through physical touches, vibrations.
Oh,
So if you have the
oh,
contact mic in front of you without any touch, there's no sound. You have to
no
touch it to make
way.
sound. So from the core of the technology, you have to interact with the work to make sound.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Touch-based microphone? I never heard of this.
Yeah. So contact mic only pick up
Okay.
vibrations basically. So a lot of musicians used to, put on acoustic guitar and to like amplify that voice. So in this case, this sort of like object or device that I made are have to activate about performers.
Question, you said that you went to undergrad for, was it new media? And
Yeah,
what did you go to graduate school for? Was it studio art?
I went to Royal School of Design for printmaking.
Ah, printmaking. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I would not I would not have guessed that. How'd you make your way to kind of sound and performance and
Uh,
sculpture?
it's kind of a long story. So at the time that I entered grad school is so maybe like the peak of pandemic. And I have undergrad degree in new media, which is a lot of like screen-based work, kind of like design focus or visual design emphasized. But towards the end of sorry, I have to like dial back a little bit to undergrad to
Yeah,
get
that's fine.
into
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
grads.
please.
So my college, so that was like I'm very much a trained designer, but towards the last year, for my graduating project, I kind of discovered printmaking. So I was doing a lot of printmaking, particular in letterpress, screen printing, but also bookmaking.
Mm.
And after my college, I was working for another institution in the Bay Area. It's called California College of the Arts.
Oh
I
yeah, for
was
sure.
working for the curatorial program, and we're working on that. I was like practicing as a printmaker, doing residencies or like entering group shows with my printmaking works. So that's kind of my natural instance going to grad school, thinking about I want to do more printmaking works in a more, I guess more serious way because you're going to a grad school. Um, so before entering the school, a grad school, there's a long time that, none of us have access to studio. So my first year I did a lot of print. So it's very much paper, ink, kind of like very straightforward printmaking, but in a more campy way I want to describe it. So
Mm.
my practice even before entering grad school was very much installation, sort of a kind of non-traditional, printmaking work in a way. It's more installation, more kind of like modular work. Can I talk about those impressions or talking about how printmaking duplicates in a more abstract way? So the first year I did a lot of work on that sense, and then after the first year, almost like end of first semester, I did a residency called Haystack School for Mountain Arts in Maine.
Yeah, for sure.
And at that point, I kind of realized I want to make more spatial works, even with paper or material at large, that speak to more traditional printmaking sense.
Mm.
And then from there, I took a lot of classes at RISD with digital plus media department, which, I picked more sound emphasized classes. And from there, kind of just like slowly layering up and here with
And now here
installations
you
and
are.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 great. Yeah, sorry, I'm always interested about how artists kind of came to their current practice. But one more thing that I would like to ask you just about the ensemble series before we move on is choreography that kind of went
Mhm.
into the performers' actions? Because I mentioned just briefly in passing that in the beginning the performers were kind of very subtle with their touches, but then it got more and more aggressive as the performance went on.
Mhm.
Um, did you see yourself as kind of a role as a choreographer, or did the performers kind of do that on their own?
Uh, so the performers really do them on their own. So in terms of my role in this work, I kind of like I constantly want to disappear in the series of work because most of the time I see all these objects that I made already kind of like a present of me. So I like my body, at least I don't want to be, part of this work. And in terms of like choreography, I don't really choreograph, like I don't really tell all the performers what to do. So usually the setup, maybe I should mention this earlier. So usually
Yeah.
the setup of this work is I invite five to six performers or people coming to the space that the place coming to the place that will be performed. So in this case, LMCC on Governor Island. So I have them come in the morning and I prepare some like breakfast, tea, or coffee. So we all sit down and kind of talk about what we're gonna do today and introduce with each other and talk about a little our own experience in the city or, just kind of like being artists and, it's like in the city. Then I tell them or like very briefly tell them how this object or instrument functions. Basically, you touch it to make sound. And I don't give them so that's all of it, the prompt. And sometimes tell them, oh,
That's
you
amazing.
can consider these objects as extension of your body, but also, you can see as the parallel of your body. So you can treat them as violent or as gentle as you want it.
Mm.
And all the interaction are really based on the performers. So how they interact with each other. It's a very, very ensemble, very kind of like what's the word? I can't remember the words, but like very free expression between them. And after several edition of the work, I kind of realized there's an arc, right? Like in just like as a human, as a group activity, how people progress in the more uh like in the bigger picture, right? So at the beginning, they kind of like, trying to figure out how to make sound or how to just like, spend some time with their own objects. Then they move it on to like listen to other people making like cool sound they want to mimic, and they start copying that kind of actions. And then
Very
they move
cool.
on to like, oh, at some sort of space, they're really comfortable with each other, maybe after 20, 30 minutes, and they start kind of interact with each other or creating sounds and rhythm that, matching each other's. And the very last part is, when they get a little bit exhausted, they're, the sort of a little bit more aggressive and anger emotion show. So that's how towards the end they're all tired. They're kind of like, kind of kicking the instrument a little bit. They're hitting each other instruments in a way that I see is a sign of like how they really get close to each other in some ways.
Yeah, so brilliant. And that arc tends to happen naturally.
Yeah, yeah, most
So
of the time, yeah.
fascinating. It seems like very primal, right? Especially like
Yeah.
the imitating, and then it becomes almost like a competition where the aggressiveness comes in, and then you become
Mhm.
exhausted. That's so brilliant. So brilliant. Now I'm
Yeah.
curious because you have another series that's very much related, and it's called Composition Series.
Mhm.
Um, and is my understanding correct that it's similar materials except it's not activated by performers?
Right. So in
Okay.
some sense, so composition theory, um, it could come before ensemble theory in some way. So usually if the ensemble theory are not activated, I would like to call it composition theory. But
Oh, I see.
but if composition theory is on display or in some sort of exhibition setting, they're more carefully displayed or they're carefully placed as installation.
Mm.
And so most of the time, composition theory are constantly playing a white noise or pink noise or brown noise or different kind of frequency of noise as is. And I usually leave the work turned on. So when people come and they have the braveness to touch the work, then they will kind of like, surprised by the instrument where the object actually makes sound.
That's great. How do participants or viewers or attendees know that they can touch the work?
I usually don't have any sign out. So if they kind of like touch it, it's kind of a
That is brave.
surprise. Yeah. Yeah, so the ongoing series is a bigger performance that is really take a lot of time and time to planning. I was kind of sort of asking a lot of my friends who already, you know, in their mid-career were like late immersion and ask them how can you sustain an ongoing project that you still have passion but is really draining at the same time.
Good question.
Uh, so they were all suggesting, using the similar structure or similar material that I already have and creating something new that still excite you. So my solution for this ongoing project are solo performance. So I don't need to, trying to get grants to pay the performers, or I don't need to rent a huge place to do a 40 minutes or 50 minutes performance.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason I mentioned this because the solo performance that I do involve with score writings or score makings. So I start making all these sort of solo scores that purely for me to remember, what to do on a action-based work, with how can I how am I interacting with the object that I make, or how much I'm tweaking on the mixtures, or how much I'm tweaking on the factors. And I really like making these scores over the past 2 years. So the latest, the upcoming performance that I'm gonna do this summer gonna involve a score on the wall. So that's the latest sort of a new thing that I'm introducing to this series.
Yeah, very exciting. And where is this going to be performed, the solo performance?
So the performance happening on August 1st at 601 Art Space in Lower Manhattan.
Um, so okay, so there we just spoke about what's to come, but I would like to talk about maybe like one or two projects that kind of helped you to get where you are currently. So the first earlier work I'd like to talk about way is Untitled, and it's from 2020, and it looks like almost like an abstracted portrait on, I'm reading here, Kozo paper. Can you talk about this project and maybe how it helped you to get where you're currently at?
Yeah, so I would say this work is sort of the origin story of the current works. So this is like first semester grad school work that I've done. And at the time I was reading this paper written by the two queer theorists from Taiwan University, and they are doing a queer reading on this uh, ancient Chinese fable, talk about penumbra, shadow, and objects, basically. So the original fable kind of basically describe uh, uh, a penumbra asking shadow why you're doing everything the object does, in a way that you're a shadow, you're following whatever the objects do. And the queer theorists did a queer perspective reading on the identity of penumbra, saying the penumbra as a already marginalized identity are still questioning their own existence, but also another's existence in conjunction with their own identity. So I thought it was
Can
very
you just
uh,
clarify penumbra? Can you clarify what this is?
yeah. So penumbra in a more common sense is just like shadow. So if you see a shadow and you see this like very fainted line on the edge, so those are penumbra.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and
And
so now that I have a better understanding of what that is, so what was these queer theorists, what were they saying in relation to this?
they were saying the already marginalized identity of penumbra, they're asking, shadow existence, sort of asking the masses, the majority of people's existence, in conjunction with their own existence, which is already on the very edge of the relationship between
Oh, brilliant.
penumbra objects and shadow.
Brilliant.
And I was really fascinated by, how I related to penumbra in a way, not even being mere of shadow, kind of just like existing on the very edge of the majority, or kind of like my identity in this country in a way.
Mm.
Um, and I sometimes, if I read a more complex theory or some sort of a harder reading, I like to do experiments or some sort of physical um, manipulation to help me understand where I place in this theory, or so I can move forward to make work that, better digest in a way. So this is the work that in response to that, it's a performance, but also it's a kind of installation in a way. So the technique is basically using this lightweight muslin and dye with liquid light, which is a photogram process. And I kind of stood in front of this fabric for 40 minutes in front of a harsh projection light. And so
Oh,
my so
fine.
where I covered is the where it's unprocessed, and
Mhm.
where it's colored then is processed. And the way I presented this work is I will ask people to come see this work. Then I'll cover the work first, right? Because I don't want to keep the work developing. And then
Mhm.
when people come to the work, then I review this work so they can see my silhouette or portraiture disappearing over time.
Mm.
And this like very sort of a base notion of this work is if you're standing in front of this work, or if you are some sort of like covering this work, and if there's light behind you or from any angle, you are also in this work. But it's just the reason because you're not there long enough, so it won't show your trace visibly. But in the notion that you're already in this work while observing this work.
No,
Mm.
I could certainly see connections, but I'd like you to explain it. So how do you see this as kind of making way or making a path towards what you're currently
Mhm.
doing with sound and touch?
Yeah, so I'm personally very happy with this work and how kind of like I physically transition, and at least in my mindset, that I, understand the relation between penumbra, shadow, and object within my own experience. But I do get a lot of comments, not really critiques, saying this is a very like a melancholy piece, or in a way that is towards more negatively sad. Either it's the color blue, or naturally watching some silhouette disappear in front of your eye. But this is not really my intention of, kind of retelling this like very overtold immigrant narrative about, suffering, about kind of experience melancholy lifestyle every day. So at the time, I was not really trying to focus on that kind of narrative, but I do get a lot of direct comment about that, which I understand that how people kind of react to that instantly to go, match with, sort of autobiography or maker's perspective. So I really want to kind of like leave that uh narrative that told by others. And so I think in a way that how to remake or make a work that talk about the same thing that I want to talk to, but harder for people to comment on, or instantly relate to, or instant to, detour to this immigrant narrative.
Mm.
Um, then I kind of like move into a more object-based where sculpture work through the same theory or through the same sort of concept that I'm trying to convey. And that work is 511, which is somewhere also
Yeah, I'm going to do a screen share
autobiography.
again. Let's see. This piece here.
Yeah,
Is that how tall you are?
yeah, that's how to.
Yeah.
And this is also the first time I started using UV thermal pigments, which is later very present in the ensemble series as well. So
Mhm.
that's the pigment that change and react to the environments for your body temperature. So this piece is kind of like a continuation or on a different perspective on the self portraiture work. So I create this the wax stack of wax mixture that using this pigments. So the way I cast this work is I will leave 10 to 20% of the previous wax body and cast to the different one, and then eventually stack to my own high. So I kind of like stretch the observation time or the viewing time that this work should be placed in a liminal space, which is very overused words right now for most of the diaspora artists, or place in the, just like any space that it requires you to be there for a very long time to see the gradually changes, and in a way that's more like it requires your to put more efforts to view this work, and also kind of want to talk about, how immigrants trying to camouflage in a new environments. This is kind of like cross to all communities.
Mm.
So the UV theremin will literally change or reacts to the given environments you place them in, right? So in this particular documentation, it was in my studio. It was really hot in the summer, so a lot of the cubicle are already like close to pale. But if it's wintertime, then it became very, very, very dark.
So I think the last piece that I would like to talk about here is one that's titled "State of Flux:
Mhm.
Self-Autonomy." Was this is this you pictured in this video?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And what's going on here? So if I just kind of look at the documentation, it looks like a long horizontal video with, um, you're appearing on either end of the long rectangle. On one side, you're interacting with these. Is it the contact mics again?
Yeah. So this work is again have the similar parallel with this untitled self-portraiture because before I apply to a more public performance work, I like to experiment on myself, like on my own body. So almost in the sense that it is parallel to untitled portraiture of, imprint myself on the fabric. In this case, I was trying to, experience the object that I created and how does that perspectives with touches and sound intertwine with again the penumbra shadow and object relationship with myself, and in this case two of my physical body and also one that more abstract to a body, which is the object and instrument that I made.
Well, Wei, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. So again, I'll make sure to plug in your upcoming performance in August. And listeners, be sure to follow Wei on their Instagram account and their website. I'll make sure to include lots of links. Wei, thank you again for your time and for your work and for sharing your work.
Thank you, Kimberly, for having me. This is really fun.
All right, listeners, that's all for this week. Please be sure to tune in next week as we will be beginning our special series on artists who deal with textiles. We have some weaving artists up and also some sculpture artists who work with fabric. Hope to see you all then. Have a safe week. Bye-bye.